The Last Days of Moises Mendoza, a tale of tragedy and redemption. A quiet morning shattered. In the sleepy town of Farmersville, Texas, where the sun rises gently over fields of golden wheat and the air hums with the quiet rhythm of rural life, March 18, 2004, began like any other day. The small community, nestled in the heart of Collin County, was a place where neighbors knew each other's names, where the clatter of ATVs and the soft neigh of horses were as common as the morning breeze. But that morning, a chilling unease settled over one modest home on the edge of town, a home that belonged to Rachelle Tolleson, a 20-year-old single mother whose life revolved around her 5-month-old daughter, Avery. Rachelle's mother, accustomed to dropping by for a quick visit, arrived at the house just after sunrise. The back door yawned open, an unsettling invitation into a scene of chaos. The living room was a wreckage of overturned furniture, the bed shoved askew as if caught in a violent struggle. Divorce papers, smudged with a muddy boot print, lay scattered on the kitchen floor like fallen leaves. In the bedroom, little Avery wailed alone on a mattress, her tiny cries piercing the eerie silence. Rachelle, vibrant and full of promise, was gone. The discovery sent a jolt through Farmersville. Neighbors rallied, their boots pounding the earth as they searched fields and backroads, some on horseback, others on ATVs, their faces etched with worry. For 5 days, they scoured the countryside, clinging to hope. But hope turned to horror when a hiker, 10 miles from town, stumbled upon a grim scene in the woods, a pile of charred logs, hiding the burned remains of a young woman. Dental records would later confirm the unthinkable: it was Rachelle. This wasn't just a disappearance. It was a murder, cold and calculated, that would unravel a web of betrayal, violence, and a past that refused to stay buried. At the heart of it was Moises Sandoval Mendoza, a 21-year-old with a charming smile and a darkness that simmered beneath the surface. His story, and Rachelle's, would collide in a tragedy that left a community grieving and a family forever changed. The night everything changed. To understand the horror of that March morning, we must rewind to the night before, March 17, 2004. Rachelle had spent the evening at her mother's house, laughing and cradling Avery, her world centered on her daughter's gummy smiles. Around 10 p.m., she returned home, settling into what she thought would be a quiet night. But somewhere in the shadows, a plan was forming, one that would snuff out her light forever. Moises Mendoza wasn't a stranger to Rachelle. They had crossed paths in high school, their lives briefly intersecting in the hallways of Farmersville High. Moises, with his easy charm and boyish looks, had caught her eye once, but Rachelle, newly separated from her husband Andrew, had no interest in rekindling old connections. She was focused on her future, on raising Avery, on moving forward after a messy divorce. But Moises saw something else, an opportunity, a twisted desire that would spiral into unspeakable violence. That night, a bonfire party roared on the outskirts of town, a gathering of young locals drinking and laughing under the Texas stars. Rachelle was there briefly, exchanging small talk, unaware that Moises was watching. Witnesses later recalled seeing him linger near her, his eyes tracking her movements. When she left, he followed. What happened next would become a confession so chilling it would haunt investigators for years. Moises later admitted to picking Rachelle up that night, claiming she went willingly. But the scene at her home told a different story, a struggle, a fight for survival. In his truck, he choked her until she lost consciousness, her body limp against the worn leather seats. He drove her to a secluded field behind his house, where the nightmare deepened. There, he assaulted her, choked her again, and dragged her deeper into the darkness. In a final act of brutality, he strangled her until she stopped moving, then stabbed her throat to ensure she was gone. As panic set in, he returned to her body, doused it in gasoline, and set it ablaze, hoping the flames would erase his sins. But the fire couldn't hide everything. The logs he used, scavenged from the bonfire party, carried a unique chemical signature, a mix of metals and titanium that would become a forensic breakthrough. Those logs, tested against samples from the party, linked the crime scene to Moises, a thread that began to unravel his carefully constructed facade. The hunt for a killer. As Farmersville mourned, investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle of Rachelle's death. At first, suspicion fell on Andrew, Rachelle's estranged husband. Their divorce had been contentious, and he had been at the bonfire party where the telltale logs originated. But Andrew's alibi held firm. Friends vouched for his drunken presence at the party, and he hadn't left until dawn. The logs, however, pointed elsewhere. Witnesses revealed that Moises, not Andrew, had brought the firewood to the party, a seemingly mundane detail that would prove damning. When police questioned Moises, his story crumbled. He admitted to knowing Rachelle, to picking her up that night, but his claim that she left with him willingly clashed with the evidence: the ransacked house, the abandoned baby, the muddy boot print on divorce papers. His second interrogation revealed a darker truth. He confessed to the assault, the murder, the burning of her body in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. Yet his demeanor was chilling, cold, detached, as if recounting someone else's story. The evidence mounted quickly. A pair of boots in Moises's room, reeking of gasoline and caked with soot, matched the print on Rachelle's divorce papers. Jeans buried in his closet held flecks of her blood, confirmed by DNA testing. His past, too, raised red flags. Just months earlier, he had attempted to abduct multiple women in Dallas, released on bail when Rachelle vanished. The picture was clear: Moises Mendoza was not a man caught in a moment of passion but a predator with a pattern. On July 1, 2005, a Texas jury faced a grim decision. Moises had confessed, so guilt was not in question. The trial centered on his fate. Was he a danger to society? Were there mitigating factors to spare his life? The prosecution painted him as a remorseless killer, his history of violence a warning of what he might do if spared. The defense argued for leniency, citing a troubled upbringing, but their pleas fell flat. The jury's verdict was unanimous: death. 2 decades on death row. For over 20 years, Moises Mendoza lived in the shadow of his sentence, confined to a cell on Texas's death row. The Polunsky unit, a stark fortress of concrete and steel, became his world, a place where time stretches endlessly, punctuated only by the clanging of doors and the whispers of men awaiting their fate. His days were a monotony of routine: meals slid through a slot, brief glimpses of sunlight during recreation, and the constant weight of his crimes. His legal team fought tirelessly, filing appeals that argued his trial was flawed. They claimed his defense had failed to explore his mental health, his childhood marked by instability and neglect. Perhaps, they argued, a deeper look into his psyche could have swayed the jury. But Texas courts, known for their unyielding stance on capital punishment, rejected each appeal. Federal courts followed suit, leaving Moises to face the inevitable. Outside the prison walls, Rachelle's family carried their grief like a stone. Her parents, her brothers, her cousin, and her uncle grappled with a loss that time could not heal. Avery, the daughter Rachelle adored, grew up without her mother's embrace, her childhood shaped by stories of a woman she would never know. The pain was a quiet undercurrent in Farmersville, a wound that refused to close. As the years passed, Moises changed, or so he claimed. He found solace in faith, meeting regularly with a spiritual advisor who spoke of redemption and grace. He wrote letters, read books, and, some say, began to confront the weight of his actions. But for Rachelle's family, his transformation, if genuine, offered little comfort. The man who had taken her life still breathed, while she was reduced to ashes and memory. The final hours. On April 23, 2025, the sun rose over Huntsville, Texas, casting long shadows across the Walls unit, where Texas carries out its executions. Moises Mendoza, now 41, faced his final day. The state no longer allowed death row inmates to choose their last meal, a policy changed in 2011 after inmates abused the privilege with extravagant orders they refused to eat. Instead, Moises received the standard prison fare, a plate of bland food that did little to mark the gravity of the moment. As the clock ticked towards 6 p.m., he was led to the execution chamber, a sterile room with a gurney at its center. His spiritual advisor stood by his side, offering prayers that echoed softly in the silence. Through a window, Rachelle's family watched, her parents, brothers, cousin, and uncle, their faces a mix of resolve and sorrow. On the other side, Moises's wife, sister, and 2 friends sat, their eyes fixed on the man they had known in better days. Strapped to the gurney, Moises spoke. His voice, steady but heavy, carried the weight of 2 decades of reflection. He turned to Rachelle's family, addressing each by name. "I am sorry for having robbed you of Rachelle's life," he said, his words cutting through the room like a blade. He spoke of Avery, the daughter left motherless, acknowledging the irreparable harm he had caused. "I know nothing I could ever say or do would ever make up for it. I want you to know that I am sincere." Then, turning to his own loved ones, he switched to Spanish, his voice softening. "I love you. I am with you. I am well and at peace," he said. "You know that I'm well, and everything is love." The words hung in the air, a final bridge between the man he was and the one he hoped to be remembered as. At 6:21 p.m., the lethal injection began. Moises gasped twice, sharp intakes of breath that seemed to pull at the edges of life itself. Then came the snores, 10 in all, each one fainter than the last. By 6:40 p.m., his body was still, and the prison doctor pronounced him dead. Moises Sandoval Mendoza, the man who had torn a family apart, was gone.